Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Welcome to the Big Life, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Neal Oates Jr., and I'm here with my friend, my partner in success, partner in progress, Mr. Robin Lewis. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, doing great, sir. And just with a little joke that you and I were having before jumping on here. Choo-choo! I can feel the train coming, brother.
Okay, Robin, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you have a success partner who believes in you sometimes more than you believe in yourself, because Robin is that for me. And at times it's great. At sometimes it is frustrating because he would not allow me to sit and wallow in my pity. He would not allow me to sit there and look at all the negativity. And so get you a good success partner that gets on your nerves sometimes. It's a great thing. So Robin, thank you for hearing the train coming when I feel like there has been a derailed train and I'm still waiting at the station. So thank you for that in all seriousness, sir.
Yeah, no, sir. Thank you. You're that in my life as well. And I couldn't agree more with what you. Hey, we didn't plan this, folks, but it's so true. Get you a Neal in your life, Neal Oates Jr. Get somebody like that who will come beside you, encourage you, challenge you, support you, and kind of be on a journey or a path of your potential together. Neal, I appreciate you very much, man. I say it to you all the time.
And we haven't even jumped into this episode, so that's how I know this is going to be a good one. But right here, Robin, how odd or strange is it that we can often see the train coming for our friend, our partner, our colleague, when we feel like we've been forgotten personally, right?
Yeah,
and so
true.
then it takes someone else to see this thing and be like, man, you're so close. And you're like, what world are you looking at? Which story are you reading? Because I feel like I am miles or years away, and yet on the other side, that person feels something for you and they're like, oh, just hang in there one more day, one more hour. You never know what's going to happen.
Yes, and it's true. Sometimes it is easier for us to see it in somebody else than we see it in ourselves. Sometimes we are our worst critic, or sometimes, we're in it. And in fact, what we're going to be talking about today will kind of touch on that a little bit too. But yeah, the point is that that's one of the benefits of having people around you, is that sometimes we can see and encourage things that maybe, so for others, that maybe we can't see right away or that quickly, or maybe just right now we're losing focus. There's so many things that can cause that. So yeah, right on. And so
All right.
I'm there, you are there, our listeners are there. That's the reality. I think that's the good news for everybody to hear, is that at some point in time, we're all there. We all need people around us for that reason.
You're absolutely correct. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're glad that you all are here with us on this episode of the Big Life Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about something that, as Robin mentioned, it sounds simple, but affects nearly every part of your life, of our lives, and that's thinking time. So you're like, Neal, thinking time, and this is not time to scroll, not time to recover, not time to catch up, but real thinking time. And so here's what we're talking about. The kind that creates clarity, that thinking time that creates clarity, direction, and wise decisions. A lot of people say, I just don't have time to think. And we understand that. But in most cases, the real issue isn't the amount of time you have. The real issue is what your life is structured to prioritize. And that's where we are hoping that this episode will help you maybe reprioritize what's important in your life.
Right on. So this episode is a space for you to slow down and reflect, without performance and without pressure. If you're like Neal and I, we are looking to perform, and there is a pressure to what we do. But this topic here matters because when you don't have time to think, you don't just lose strategy. you lose peace, you lose discernment, you lose the ability to tell the difference between what's urgent and what's important. And then your life becomes a series of reactions. You may still function well, but when we're in that state, we don't feel grounded and we don't feel like we have clarity.
Robin, you said that so well. And so I want to move into this first idea that changes everything. And I just mentioned it, but most people don't lack time. They lack protected thinking environments, a place that they can go, an environment in which thinking can happen. And here's what we know. If your calendar is built around availability, you'll live in response mode. I have been there, Robin. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you've been there as well.
Yes,
If
sir.
your day is built around other people's access to you, your mind will never settle long enough to see what needs to be seen. And this is where, as you just mentioned, Robin, sometimes we're too close to the thing. We're in it and we can't see it because of our proximity to the thing. But here's why thinking time is so important. Like real thinking time is so important. Thinking requires separation. And that might scare some of us. That might scare me. And so here's what that means. That thinking time requires separation, even small separation. It requires me, you, us, to step out of the current that we're in as achievers, as dreamers, and not just swim harder in this current. We don't want to just go upstream, fight the battles. Sometimes we have to get out of the current altogether.
And something, Neal, is so true. And you know what happens when that separation doesn't exist, when we don't allow that time? The mind stays in a low grade state of alert. You're always listening for the next problem. So it affects our mindset that we're always listening for the next message, the next need that needs to be solved. And even if you're not the anxious type personality, your nervous system can still become trained for this urgency. Do you have this sense of urgency, listeners? You might know what I'm talking about. I certainly have been there. And that creates a life where you're constantly on. And so even when you're technically off, you're still on. And when we live that way long enough, then quiet can feel uncomfortable, right? We feel like we need to be doing something. Silence can feel like we're not being productive. And then stillness can feel like something is being neglected.
Robin, I'm so glad you said that because this is the audience that we're speaking to. You are an achiever. Maybe you've gotten where you are by sheer might, by swimming harder against the stream, against the current. And so for you saying that, I'm like, why is Robin talking directly to me? He could have just said this off the air. He didn't have to wait until we got on the podcast recording to share Neal's feelings, Neal's insecurities. Because if I'm being honest, Robin, many times when I am still and silent, I do feel unproductive. And that's an important point. For a lot of high performers, the reason they don't think isn't because they can't find the time. It's because thinking doesn't feel like productive work. It doesn't feel like output. It doesn't feel measurable. And so what happens is, even when there's space, we fill it with task. Right here, guilty, number one. We fill it with activity because doing is familiar. I must say that thinking is unfamiliar for me, even though I understand its value. Doing is familiar. Doing creates a sense of control. But in my life, what I've realized is that thinking is where the real leverage is. And if you're leading, if you're building, or if you're carrying responsibility, thinking is not optional. I will say that one more time for the people way in the back, namely myself. If you're leading, building, or carrying any responsibility, thinking is not optional. It's essential.
Yeah, man, it's so true. And so let's you already talked about this, but let's name what may be a common pattern. People will say, I don't have time to think. But what they often mean is, I don't have time to sit with what I'm avoiding.
Why would you say that, Robin? I don't know why you would just say it just like that, because that's so true.
Yeah. There are things that we're avoiding because it might be difficult, or we're unsure of it, or we are uncomfortable, or we don't want to face that right now. What they might be saying is, I don't have time to feel what I've been carrying. I don't want to even go there right now. So it's not that we don't have the time, but I don't have the time maybe to confront the decisions that I've been delaying. Also, we could consider our listeners, thinking time doesn't just produce strategy, it also produces truth. And oftentimes, truth has a cost. And truth might require change, or at least it requires us just being honest with ourselves. And so it might not be the time, it might be the fact that we are having to face truth and be honest with ourselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to go on the record. This might be Robin Lewis's last time here on the podcast if he keeps putting my business out here in public like that. So everything that you just said, Robin, like I felt it all. And I wish I could say I'm talking years back or months back, right? I'm talking about a constant feeling of delaying what I know I need to, the decisions that I need to make, not wanting to feel the responsibility that I've been carrying. And so as you say that, it forces me, even though we prepared for this, hearing it and looking in that mirror, it feels different, right? And when you're living in motion, honesty gets delayed, right? I could just be busy. I don't have to think about being honest. When I'm living in motion, I can keep moving and still feel productive. But clarity doesn't show up because you haven't slowed enough to hear yourself. And oftentimes, if I'm busy, I don't get to listen to the true voices in my head. I get to listen to that voice that's saying, just keep going, do harder. And so I want to look at another reason thinking time disappears, Robin, if I may.
Yes, sir.
That's because everything becomes important. Guilty right here. When priorities aren't defined, everything competes, especially competes for your time. When standards aren't clear, everything feels urgent. And more importantly, when roles aren't clean, everything ends up on your plate, on my plate as an achiever, as a high producer. And when everything matters, nothing gets the space that it deserves. And I know you mentioned previously here the difference between urgent and important. And so if we aren't careful, nothing gets the space that it deserves.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's where we start getting this mental clutter. Our minds are full, or with all the tasks that we're doing. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily doing the wrong things. What I think I hear you saying here is that they're doing too many things at the same level of importance. So that's about prioritizing, right? Getting the right priority. The mind wasn't designed to hold a full calendar, The mind wasn't designed to carry a full calendar, a full business, a full family life, and a full emotional load without a rhythm to process it. And so we have to find that rhythm. So people become efficient, but scattered. And, productive, but internally. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Robin, I do want to pause here for a moment. So we talk about rhythm, and you and I as high achievers, but then also coaching high achievers. I know this is something that often feels forced and is so unnatural to us, finding that rhythm, because most of us have this one pace, and that is go, like capital G-O, just go. So when you talk about finding that rhythm to process everything that's on our plate, if you would, we didn't discuss this earlier, but if you would, how does one go about finding that rhythm so we are efficient and effective, so that we're not scattered, so that we can reduce some of that mental fog, if you would? Do you have a way that maybe we could work through a process or a system or a rhythm?
Well, definitely this morning we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves there, but I do want to mention that that's where thinking can really help us. But I think, Neal, specifically what you're talking about here is, and this comes through thinking, but what you're talking about here is making sure that we have a priority order. I'll never forget, I'll just give a quick example that Gary Keller, I believe, I don't want to say his name wrong, The One Thing. Is it Gary Keller?
Yes, sir.
So he wrote that book called The One Thing. And one of the things that he said in there that really helped me is when he was talking about my family life, for example, specifically my relationship with my wife. One of the things that he helped me to understand is that if that is a primary relationship that you have to give that priority needed. Sometimes we can allow things on my desk to wait. There's some things on my desk that I don't have to deal with right now. If I have a situation with my wife, or not even just a situation, like it doesn't need to get to a situation. But in other words, if my wife is a priority in my life, then there's some things that cannot wait.
Amen to that.
Just like something can wait on my desk, there are things that can't wait for my family. And so sometimes that might mean that our business gets disrupted by a family thing, right? But the point is that when it's about getting our priorities right and then structuring our calendar accordingly. That's what I would suggest. And so, like Neal, you're somebody. I'm not telling your personal business. I don't think you mind sharing this. But Neal and Joanna, you guys have a date night each.
Absolutely. Every
Right?
week, Thursday nights.
And that's on your calendar. So that's
On my
the kind
calendar
of
does
thing.
not move.
Yes. One of the things for me this year is for me to really focus on developing relationships, and prospecting is the word that I use. And for me, it's very important that I put a place in my calendar on a daily basis for that. Whether I'm reaching out to somebody new, or whether I'm following up with somebody, or whether I'm attending an event that helps me to establish new relationships, I want to be doing something every day. And so I have that scheduled on my calendar now. So that's a priority to me. And so there are some other things that I will allow to not get on my calendar, number one, or it takes another second place or third place to that. And I think the more that we have that figured out, is the better that it's going to be. So that's what I think of when it comes to creating that rhythm.
I absolutely love everything you just said, Robin. So one of the things, you dropped a bar and you said our busyness and then business. If we aren't careful, we allow our business to turn into nothing but busyness, and then we don't have a profitable business. And then the next part, you talked about that the relationships and your focus this year. But I just did a study and taken notes on relational equity, and talk about how much I'm going forward in 2026 and beyond is going to be really about that relational equity that we have, and that human touch is going to be a differentiator in so many instances when everything else is equal. But the one who has that human touch, that real relationship is going to make a difference. So now we're going to give our audience a practical reframe, because Robin and I here on The Big Life is all about giving us something that we can make tangible, that we can apply. So here's what I want to say. We do not find time to think. And you're like, Neal, what? I'm looking on my calendar. I need to find time to think. That's never going to work. You build time to think. So thinking time isn't what happens after everything else is handled. It's what allows you to handle things well in the first place. And so that's why we want to build our thinking time. Robin and I are big on our calendars. So for lack of a better term, we are slaves to our calendars, meaning we just schedule those priorities in our lives. So we want to build that time in. And there are 3 structural reasons thinking time disappears. And so I'm going to run through these quickly. First, your schedule is built for access, not focus. Ouch. Even if, as I say that, is built for access, not focus. Second, your communication habits are interrupt driven. And so that's one of the things. Communication habits are interrupt driven. And then third, You don't have a defined rhythm for reflection and decision making. And so that defined rhythm for reflection and decision making is a high priority in my life and Robin's life, and hopefully in your life after this episode. And so if any one of those is true, your brain stays in reaction mode and on that low grade level of alert and awareness.
Neil, it's funny. I was just sharing on a call recently. I don't think I've shared this with you. And it's kind of a weird thing to put out there in the public like I'm doing right now. But I discovered and I'm using don't interrupt more now on my phone. And it's simply because of what you just said. My communication habits were of such that I would allow interruptions. And as I allowed interruptions, that could look like a text, an email, a call, a social media post, because you know how those things are. They just kind of pop up. You're not necessarily going looking, but they just pop up. They just happen. I realized that caused me to lose focus. Just taking a look sometimes, not even responding, just looking at a text. For example, it distracts me from what I was focusing on, and then by the time I come back to what I was focusing on, time has already gone by. And so it's such a good thing. Now, what I've done in so people understand now, I'm not disregarding people that might be trying to reach me, right? Phone call, text, email. What I have done in that process is set up a specific time, which my brother here, Neil, has done this for years, I think. I set up a specific time to return calls and emails and texts and so on. And so you are responding to people, but you're controlling. And that's the communication habits that I think you were mentioning. That's such a big one. There's also a personal pattern that I think often shows up too, where people confuse peace with passivity. They think that if they slow down, that they're falling behind.
Mm-hmm.
But slowing down to think is not falling behind. That's what we want you to hear. It's actually stepping into leadership. Thinking is how you prevent small issues from becoming big ones. Thinking is how you recognize when you might be misaligned and you catch it early enough. Thinking is how you hear what your values are asking for. There are many a times that Robin might claim a value, but when I step back and look at my life, I'm actually not living it. And when I can stop to take the time to think, it helps me to catch that earlier. So that's the idea.
I love the fact that you said thinking allows us to hear what your values are asking for and not what your colleague, not what your customers or clients or kids or spouse, significant other are asking for. Because if we aren't careful, we will never hear those things that our values are saying, hey, I'm over here. I need this of you. I demand this of you. So now we're going to make this concrete. If you're always the one solving problems, your day will always be full. I mean, that's just the reality of the time that we live in. If you're always the one approving decisions, your day will be full. If you are always the one keeping things moving, guess what about your day? It's going to be full. And here's what the reality is. The moment your day is full, your thinking gets pushed to the margins. And I'm going to say gets pushed outside of the margins. But the issue isn't your effort, right? You're here listening, watching this episode right now because of, hey, you want to improve. The issue is your system. And here's what we know to be true in every area of our lives is that you can't outwork a structure that produces overload. If you're already overloaded, you can't just work harder to overcome the overload. You have to redesign the structure, and that's what we're encouraging you to do today.
And Neil, I hate to just jump in here again to chime, but as I am where this is landing with me right now is I want to share with our listeners to we're not sharing anything new. I'm sure you've heard what we're sharing with you here today. You've heard it before, but are you doing it? Like, Neil, I can tell you, for example, there are many a times where I feel like I had to be in the midst of things and without even realizing that I was doing it. So the point is, I've heard this thought before in my life, but there are times where clearly was not living it. And so one of the things that I had to learn to do is to let go, to recognize that I don't have to be involved in everything, to really understand where I need to be involved with and recognize that I can allow the rest, just like I talked about on my desk. I can allow things to wait or somebody else to handle. And so I just want to reiterate for our listeners, I want you to really challenge yourself as you hear us today. If you need to re-listen to this episode, listen to it again and see, where am I not applying this? Where can I applying this to my life? So we're talking about redesign here, right? A system, Neil, you talked about. This starts with a simple acknowledgement, I think, and that is that your mind needs margins. Your mind needs margins. Your spirit needs margins. Your life needs margins. And this is not as a luxury, but this is a requirement for us. We need margins. And when we lack margins, you start living with emotional residue. That's the reality. Small frustrations become bigger. Patience gets thinner. Side story, my wife just said to me the other day, I think it was just the pressure of everything that was happening. But she said, I notice you're getting a little bit. And so, patience gets thinner. You're present, physically, but mentally you might be elsewhere, right? And you may not even realize that it's happening. And, somehow I kind of did realize it, but she just reinforced it for me,
She
confirmed it.
vocalized it. Yeah, come
Yeah.
on, man.
But we're going through this. If we're in this place, we're still functioning. And so maybe some of our listeners might be there right now as well.
So here's the question that you're asking, that we ask ourselves: what do we do about it? We have these lives, these businesses, these emotions, these spiritual lives where we have no margin. So we're going to offer a clear path without turning this into a checklist episode, because that's not our goal. The last thing that you want to hear is a checklist of 39 things that you need to do in order to create or build thinking time into your schedule. And you're going to say, I'm not doing any of those. So here's the first move, and that is to protect one small block of time each week and treat it like a meeting with your future self. That's going to be important. Not a meeting with your to-do list, but a meeting with your direction. So this is going to be an actual meeting on your calendar, like you will block out. And I'm going to say, and treat that appointment as if you were meeting with your most important client or customer. That's how you want to treat yourself. And then during that block, you're not asking, what do I need to do? That is the wrong question. So if we ask the wrong question, we're going to get the wrong answer. So we're not asking, what do I need to do? Instead, you're asking, what deserves my focus right now? You're asking, what is creating noise that doesn't matter? You are going to ask, what decision am I avoiding because it will require change? And then here's a big one. You're going to ask yourself during that block, during your meeting with yourself, what would make the next week simpler? Not easier, but what would make next week simpler?
Well, that's good. Those are good questions for us to sit with. And if you're like me, sometimes it's hard to sit still. And I want to encourage you, our listeners, don't judge yourself because of it. I think a lot of us would admit to the same thing. But notice that, and then consider the fact that the discomfort, often what it reveals is the fact that you've been in urgency mode for a while. That's what it might reveal. And so that's a good thing, and I think we might work our way into this thinking time, just like we would any sort of, exercise program or training or that type of thing. You could start with maybe just a walk without any input, no phone, no podcast. You're not listening to anything, no music. You're just being quiet. So take a walk, just being quiet. And the goal for Neil and I is not for you to suggest that you are going to be mystical. The goal is to give your inner world room that it needs to surface. Because clarity isn't always created. Sometimes clarity is uncovered. If we don't give ourselves the time to uncover it, it won't get uncovered. That's the power that we're sharing with you today. There is clarity that the only way you're going to receive it if you still yourself and you quiet yourself and you allow it to. Um,
Robin, that's a strong one. I absolutely love it and hate it at the same time. And here's what I'm going to say. If you're someone who leads or builds, here's a powerful shift. And here's an ask of me to you. Make thinking time part of the job, right? If you're leading or building something, make that thinking time a part of your job. If you don't schedule it, what do we know? It's not going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, you'll keep making decisions from pressure and not from principles. And we want you to be a principle-led individual. Pressure decisions are expensive. Take it from me. I've made pressure decisions in my life, and they have been expensive. They costed me time, money, but most importantly, they cost me my peace at certain points in my life. But clear decisions that come as a result of thinking time reduce waste. Clear decisions restore control over every area of our lives. And that's our goal for you here on The Big Life.
And Neal, I spoke about it a little bit earlier on, but for our listeners, clarity isn't just for business too. It's for relationships. It's for parenting. It's for your health, your personal health. It's for your faith life. When you don't think, you drift. Yeah, right, Neal. And when you drift, you live from default. And default eventually becomes a life that you didn't consciously choose. And so thinking time is not selfish time. That's what we want to encourage you with today. Thinking time, it's actually stewardship of your life.
So really quickly, going back to our conversation with Chris Robinson, that word drift is so scary. And I think that's one of my intentional actions through life is to avoid the drift, because it scares me to even hear you mention that we will be living a life that we did not consciously design. And unfortunately, we found ourselves there at times. And maybe our audience have found themselves there, or they find themselves there now. And so here's what we want. Here's how we're going to bring this home today. And it's just with one core truth that we believe here as leaders, as husbands, as fathers, as friends, is that if you don't create space to think, life will choose for you. Ouch. Your calendar will decide. Other people's needs will decide. The loudest problem will decide. And then here's a scary one. The most urgent voice will decide ultimately what your life becomes. But when you protect thinking time, you regain authorship. You get to write the story of your life the way that you intended. You start living on purpose again. I think that's something for me, especially the past 3 to 4 years, has been exciting, because I'm living on purpose again, because I've grabbed that pen and I said, here's what I want my life to look like. I want it to stand for something, mean something, not only to myself, but to those that I interact with on a daily basis.
And, Neal, somebody said to me the other day, like, hey, they can't wait until retirement so that they can really get to do what they want to do and all that kind of stuff. And, it made me think about what you just said, like, we don't need to wait for retirement in order for us to live the life that we want to live. The point there is that sometimes we kind of put it off until that point, and until that point in time, right? We feel like there's so much that we have on our plate right now. There's so much that we need to do, be doing, that it's what we really want to do has to wait until such a time. My encouragement to you, our listeners today, is you don't need to wait for that. That's the value of what we're sharing today, right? That's what Neal just said. And so they don't let the calendar, don't let other people's needs, don't let the loudest problem decide for you. Don't let the most urgent voice decide for you. Protect your thinking time so that you can live that life today. Neal, I just wanted to add that, because I see, like, I've seen myself as we're sharing with our listeners. This is how it's applied to me. Oftentimes I have allowed those things to sort of rule my life. And it's not until I step back and look that I realize that I can change that, and I need to change it. And I don't need to wait until for that to happen. And so if you're listening and you've been feeling like mentally crowded, we want you to take this episode as permission to build margin. Margin. Not because you're weak, not because you can't handle life, but because you're meant to lead your life and not just respond to it, right?
Absolutely. And so Robert and I want to say to you that we're grateful that you've spent this time with us on this episode. We hope that you'll let this information, these ideas sit with you and then make one small move this week to protect your thinking time. Don't wait until next week or say you'll do it at the end of the month. Not when things calm down now, because calm doesn't come first. We know that clarity comes first.
I love it, Neal. Man, so what a great episode, Neal. And I love this topic that you brought to us, by the way. And I'm glad that we get to share this with our listeners today. So remember, for our listeners, that we love you. God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.